On January 31st, 2018, my son Ethan, who had just turned 15, was scheduled to get his braces off. And this was a big deal in Ethan's life because he was the child that had every contraption in his mouth and had his braces on for years. And after he got his braces off, he wanted to go celebrate. And so we went to our favorite coffee shop. And as Ethan lunched on his favorite breakfast, bagels and lox, he told me about his hopes and dreams. And I remember thinking that day, looking at him, about what a difference he was going to make in this world. Well, we got home from this amazing breakfast where I think it was probably one of the best conversations I had with my son. And about an hour later, he had left to visit with his best friend from kindergarten. And about an hour later, I saw two police officers pulling up in front of my house, and my heart sank. And when they came into my home, they wouldn't really tell me anything. In fact, when they came in, it was silence. Nobody spoke. And finally, one of the police officers spoke up and just told me that Ethan was being rushed to the hospital in the ambulance and that I needed to find my husband and I needed to get there immediately. But my brain could not even process the fact that I had just said goodbye to my son about an hour ago. And how could this be? And so finally, I found my husband. He was at a business meeting downtown, and I found my husband, and we traveled to the hospital together with so much hope in our heart. And we knew when we ran into the hospital ER, and there was a collective hush. They were waiting for the parents of the dead child. And I had my babies in that hospital, and I knew where the bays were in the ER, and I was taking off, and I was trying to get to those bays because I knew that's where Ethan was going to be. But my husband and I were stopped by a social worker, and we were led into this tiny room where I always tell people no son ever reaches and no good news is ever delivered. And the ER doctor came into the room, and he slid down the wall, and he just buried his head in his hands, and he just whispered that your son is gone. And truly, when I tell people at that moment that my DNA changed in my body, it did. Because everything that you knew and you loved and you trusted up to that point literally implodes in front of you. And everything that you've worked so hard to build with your family and your marriage is just left in pieces.